Number 20. Lost in Space. Ah, yes. We're going to talk about this one, aren't we? So, back in the late 90s, they were doing this whole big thing of trying to reboot old stuff. And Lost in Space was one of them. While I will admit I still haven't watched all of the original Lost in Space series, I will admit this was actually kind of interesting because it was hip, it was cool, it was the 90s. It had CG, it had a robot that looked cool. And yeah. And let's not forget spiders. But for it's still good for just being wacky and kind of cool, action-packed popcorn fun. So, yeah. Number 19. We're Back, a dinosaur story. So, remember the 90s, folks, when there was a lot of, not Disney, not Warner movies? Yeah, you're going to see a bunch of them on here. We're Back, based on a short story of the same name, follows a group of dinosaurs who, thanks to future technology, have become sentient, have become intelligent, I should say, and rather than just being like, hey, we're smart, let's all kill the humans, they become smart to an extent that they're like, hey, humans are cool. They're not things we eat. So, they're basically sent to the future by Walter Cronkite to basically end up in the Museum of Natural History, not as exhibits, but rather being like, hey, I was a dinosaur. B, you want to know some stuff about me? To kids. Anyhow, they have to save their kid human friends from an evil twin, from Walter Cronkite's evil twin brother, who basically wants to instill fear and stuff. So, I will admit, I love the music in this thing. The cast is awesome. And overall, it's a film that I would definitely recommend to anyone who wants to show a good, kid-friendly movie with dinosaurs. Aside from Land Before Time, but there I go. Number 18. Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. Well, I will admit the first Ghost Rider was the one I saw in theaters twice. It was Ghost Rider 2 that actually was the one that did pretty badly. So much so that now Ghost Rider's back at Disney. Well, at Marvel, but I digress. So, what is the plot of Ghost Rider 2 about? Well, the story centers around, well, you guessed it, the Ghost Rider, who basically is once again played by Nicolas Cage, who is sent by a priest, played by Idris Elba, who would later go on to be in Thor, to protect the child, who basically is Damien from The Omen, but a good Damien, and basically, while keeping him safe from the devil and the devil's powered up minion Blackout, I think that was his name. Well, Mr. Rot, we'll call him. Yeah, the fact that there's a Twinkie joke about that, I should mention. Funny as Hector. So, yeah. Again, this is just a popcorn film. It's kind of weird to see some of the stuff that happens in this movie, but weird in a good way. So, yeah. It's weird, but fun. Number 17. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Yes, folks, we're talking about it. This is my 2 cents on the film. It's okay. It's also, it could be just a little bit biased because this was the only Indiana Jones film that at the time I had seen. I still have yet to see the original trilogy, but I digress. Anyhow, what is the plot of this movie about? Basically, Indiana Jones is basically thrown around a lot, surviving a nuclear explosion in a fridge, because they're really after a plot MacGuffin known simply as the Crystal Skull, which is said to give people certain powers, and once it's taken back to its proper place, will lead them to a great and awesome treasure. So yeah, everybody's talked about the fact that this movie has problems. Where do I start? So let's start with the fact that, again, Indiana Jones survives a nuclear explosion in a lead-lined fridge. Yeah, that, even for me, is a little like, okay? But that's just weird upon weird upon weird. So, yeah. There's also the fact that there's aliens. There's also the fact that all these other little problems. But for me, the only real problem I have with it was the nuking the fridge scene. That was just kind of a aha moment. So, moving on. Number 16, The Black Cauldron. Ah, yes, Disney's Black Sheep. Well, one of them. For those who don't know this movie, the story centers around a boy who basically is a keeper of a pig which has the powers of foresight. One day, the pig receives a vision that the evil force known as the Horned King is on his way looking for the plot MacGuffin known simply as the Black Cauldron. Big shock. So, yeah. Considering this movie was the film that lost to the Care Bears movie that year, a lot of people say this movie was not that good. But there are some people like me who see that this film deserves a little bit of a second chance. And I think it's kind of interesting. It's not a musical. It's not as whimsical as some of the other Disney movies. But all in all, I think it's a good film for people to give it a shot. But not for little kids, because it does get kind of spooky for about like a term. Okay. Number 15, The Pagemaster. Again, in the mid-90s, there was a whole bunch of films released by 20th Century Fox that were animated films, and this was one of them. Starring the famous child star Macaulay Culkin and Christopher Lloyd, as well as Patrick Stewart, Whoopi Goldberg, Leonard Nimoy, the list goes on. The basic plot of the story is, the story focuses on Richard Tyler, played by Macaulay Culkin, who is kind of a neurotic kid. No, neurotic. He's kind of a decaf version of Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. Anyhow, one day on a mission to go help his father get some nails to finish a project that he's working on, he gets caught up in the rain, and seeking shelter from said rain, he ends up in a library. Anyhow, one thing leads to another, ends up being a cartoon, though the title character refers to him as an illustration, and tells him that in order to get out of there, he has to face his greatest fears, which are represented in three parts of the library: horror, adventure, and fantasy. So, with a little help from some books that are sentient, Richard is on his way to get back home. Okay, now I'm pretty positive that I saw this film in theaters, and I will admit it's a fun movie. Anyhow, it's Now, I will admit, it is one of those films that was trying to push a message back when there was a big thing about trying to push like environmentalism or reading books down our throats, but it's not as bad as it was. It's not that bad now, but well, it's still kind of bad. But all in all, it's a good little movie, and it definitely will convince kids to be like, "Oh, I want to learn more about who that Captain Ahab guy or Dr. Jekyll was." So, yeah. Number 14, Once Upon a Forest. Again, we're going into the Fox cartoon department. For those who, based on a book series, the story follows a trio of, well, furlings, which are basically the animal equivalency of children, who one day find out their normal home has basically been gassed out by an accidental truck, basically hitting a broken glass bottle and one of their gas containers spilling out, causing the forest to get damaged. And the youngest of them, which is a badger child, gets basically poisoned by it, but not killed, basically in a coma. So in order to save the girl, the trio of kids must go beyond their forest to another forest, well, which isn't really a forest, it's a plain, to basically retrieve a particular flower which, when done right, will cure the girl of her predicament. I should point out that this one is got some good music in it, especially considering that the actor who plays their mentor character is the actor who played the original Phantom of the Opera on the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, and yes, he has his own musical number. There are some good music in this, and I really am trying to look for the soundtrack to this so I can have it on my iPod. Also, because I like to have CDs once in a while. And this is more of it's not nearly as bad as some of the others that are environmental messages, but it is still an environmental message saying we should try to help clean up our forests and stuff. So, yeah. Number 13, Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. Yeah, if it was going to come around to this, you gotta be a pro forest movie. So for those who've never seen this movie, it's a crying shame if you haven't. Fern Gully is about a fairy named Krista who is curious about the human world. One day, a group of humans show up who basically are there to cut down trees so they can, have wood and stuff. But one of the humans, a guy by the name of Zach, thanks to Krista's fairy magic, is basically shrunk down to the size of a fairy and basically given the forest tour. Meanwhile, thanks to a little accident, a magic tree which sealed away an ancient evil known as hexes is chopped down, releasing him and making him part of the machine set to destroy the Fern Gully. Okay, again, this is special because it's one of the earliest films I've seen, and it also should be pointed out that there are some good actors in it. You got Christian Slater, you got Robin Williams, you got Tim Curry. I mean, that's a pretty good trio, and that's not even the main characters. Though, to be fair, they're not as well known. Again, there is, like all these films in the 90s, there is some good music, and I really want to get the soundtrack to this. So, all in all, it's a good thing to really give it a shot, especially if you have little kids. Number 12, Howard the Duck. Yes, folks, I'm bringing up some Marvel. So, for those who have never seen this 80s duck egg, here's what you need to know. Howard is an alien from an alternate universe where the sentient life, or humanoid-looking ducks, is sent via a teleportation beam from his end of the universe to our end of the universe, and basically he ends up being a duck out of water scenario. Okay, I'm not going to do any more duck puns, I swear. So, okay, I will admit this is a film that's funny because it's just so funny. It's not Spider-Man, it's not the Avengers, it's just a human-looking duck in Cleveland fighting not only all the people trying to turn him into chow mein, but just the evil, just, normal for stuff. So I'm sorry if I sound really weird, but I'm just kind of working with what I've got. Number 11, Mercury Rising. Alright, going back to Bruce Willis, and going back to another Razzie film. This is a film that kind of has a bit of a place in my heart because I myself am autistic, but I need to explain the movie's plot. The story follows Art Jeffries, played by Bruce Willis, who is an FBI agent who's kind of just playing it safe, mostly due to the fact that his last mission he was on got botched up really bad. And while checking out a crime scene of a murder, he discovers a kid who is hiding inside a closet, and they're thinking, oh, hey, he survived, maybe he'll give us some clues. There's just one little problem with that. The kid is, for a better lack of term, extremely autistic. And, to add icing to the cake, the reason that the parents were killed in the first place is because of the kid's fault. See, the kid was given a puzzle book that day, and it turns out that inside the puzzle book is in fact a government supercode, which they were testing for leaks. Anyhow, now that the secret's out, and he can just crack the code by reading it, they realize that, well, Alec Baldwin realizes that in the hands of the enemy, he could be considered a big-time threat. So, now it's up to Art Jeffries to keep him alive, and hopefully will last his, as well as trying to deal with the fact that the kid's autistic. Now, I didn't know until way into my adult age that I was a high-functioning autistic. So, this film kind of has a space in my heart because, while I'm not as autistic as the kid in this movie, it's still, it's kind of a I feel your pain. And the fact that the kid, even though he's not functioning like, normal people, normal being a loose term, he's still one of the smartest brains in the world. He could just, so yeah, he could be a threat to the government. So it's a overall it's a really heart-stringing kind of movie, even though it did do bad at theaters. So yeah.